Hey friends. Okay, so I want to share a little bit of success from a current client and share how she did it. So a little bit of a case study. So this person came to me just before the beginning of the year, and she is now over 20 pounds down. And not only is that cool, but it's really cool to see her do it in this particular manner that I'll talk about. So her primary goals were weight loss. School really damaged her healthy habits and her health in general. It's really tough, and I think a lot of us can relate. My worst health was also during grad school. Ironic, but it happens a lot. It's very common. So she is a medical worker. She works night shift, which again is another challenge on our health as well. But she also suffered from low energy, fatigue, lots of sugar cravings, things like that. Her diet history, she's tried a lot of different diets. She struggled with binge eating in the past. She's done no sugar to the point she was still doing pretty much no sugar, but wanted to learn how to balance those things instead of just eliminating all of those foods that might be considered refined sugar or things like that, sweet, etc. She wasn't even having honey really at the time. She wants to learn how to balance those things without binging. So that is right up my alley, pun intended. But so after looking over her nutrition logs, and she was eating pretty well. If I pull up her file here, like her meals weren't that bad by any means, and she was eating a decent amount of protein, which is something that I very rarely see. We increased it for sure. And this is key to a lot of people. And this is why, again, I have people track their food and their weight that first initial week, is she was incredibly honest with what she was eating. Because a lot of people will start to log their food and be like, oh, wow, this is super high calorie. And they don't want to log it. And so they'll either modify the amounts, whether intentionally or unintentionally. But then I don't get to see the full numbers. So if you start logging your food, you're like, wow, I'm eating so much. It's well over 3,000 calories a day. That's fine. It's just information that I need to know. Because otherwise, if someone shows up like, hey, I'm not losing weight and I'm eating this amount of what looks like maybe like 1,500 calories or lower, when you're actually eating more, then I can't adjust your numbers correctly. I'm talking about numbers now, but we'll also talk about how she's kind of let the numbers go a little bit. So in the best possible way. So basically, after looking everything over, her nutritional recommendations were mindful eating. So number one, we are eating when we're hungry. If we are full or satisfied, learning what that means, but then also stopping when we are at that point. Eating without screens, having our eyes on our plate. We increased her protein a little bit, trying to have a good amount of protein, 20 to 40 grams at each meal if possible. And then a minimum of 100 grams of protein each day, up to 135 grams of protein per day. We put a maximum, but very rarely does anybody hit a maximum. You get pretty darn full. And then we talked about overall calories. We didn't really get specific with like carbs or fat or things like that. Specifically said, I do not care much about where fat and carbs end up at the end of the day, but I would like lots of colorful vegetables on at least 2 out of 3 meals. That allows for some flexibility in there. We can have some starchier carbohydrates, but I want the majority of our meals to look like this with lots of color, lots of plants, right? And that can include fruit as well. So that's our basic plate structure that we were aiming for. And then also to address, again, those mindful eating habits and that history of binge eating and wanting to learn better balance with things. We talked about ending our relationship with the clean plate club. So if we have things on our plate, it's hard to leave it there because we feel like we're wasting food. But it's really important to realize, like, I just overserved myself. It's fine. I can have that later if I need to. And putting that away if you want to save it for a snack, or throwing it away. The choice is up to you, but it's not a waste if it no longer serves us, right? So that was something that we worked a lot with. And then you also start to adjust your portion size as well, and then you don't have that food waste. So it's a learning process, right? We talked about some specific veggie suggestions to increase that side of things and also make it really easy to implement, so we're not spending hours and hours on meal prep. I gave her some resources as far as how to season your meals, so you're not making a bunch of complicated recipes, but things are still flavorful and easy to prep. I did 3 custom example days. So I looked at the days that she logged for me already, and then I created similar but slightly different things with portion sizes and including the foods that she already likes to enjoy. So hopefully easy to implement there. We also talked about exercise. We're walking every day. We talked about a specific step count for her to achieve every day, whether she's working, whether she's working out, etc. So we're increasing that. And then on non-work days, we're making sure we get at least a gym day or a 30-minute walk and starting from there. So all of those things she agreed with. She's like, yes, I can do that. I think that's important because I can give you plan A from the start, but if it doesn't seem doable and you get really nervous or intimidated by it, that's a red flag. We need to be successful from the start. Let's see, we added a water goal in there, and then I also gave her a book as a resource to read to kind of go along with this as well. But that's typically, after looking at everybody's intake information, that's kind of some of those initial recommendations that I look at. But my favorite part of all of this is that looking at her numbers now, she is, let's see, over 20 pounds down, so about 22-ish, 22 pounds down since beginning of the year. And she's happily way under her nutrition targets as far as calories. And she doesn't feel restricted. She's like, I don't actually pay attention too much to the macros. I try to build my plates, similar to that basic structure. I try to get enough protein. I try to get some vegetables 2 to 3 times a day and then some healthy fats in there. And then I just kind of stop when I'm full. And it's just to hear the relaxed manner that they talk about this in is really rewarding for me, because I'm not having to like wrestle someone into like a calorie deficit of like, hey, please don't eat that much, or please hit your calorie goals. It's really rewarding to hear people just eat more freely and with more intuition and just more awareness of what their body needs and what makes them feel good and what makes them not feel as good. And then they can make those decisions. And she is including those more sugar refined things on occasion, but she feels empowered to do so, and not like those foods don't hold any power over her, which again is really rewarding to see that she can implement and regulate that stuff on her own. And she has tools to do that at a dose that makes it not a habit, and it keeps it as a constant choice, which is one of my goals as a coach as well, is to teach people how to implement that in a really positive way. So hopefully that's insightful and it gives you some ideas on what the heck I talk about with clients and how I work with people and what I recommend. But those are basically the things that I recommended initially and what we are doing now with this particular client. And she has been thriving through this whole process. So if you have any questions that you want me to cover, just let me know. But otherwise, have a fantastic week.